You walk into a room, and there's a person standing there, someone you have known for years. Maybe it is your colleague, maybe your old friend, maybe someone in your own family. They smile at you, they shake your hand, they ask how you have been, and everything looks fine on the surface. But when you leave, there is this strange heaviness sitting on your chest, like someone placed a small stone right on your sternum and pressed it down gently, but deliberately. You cannot name it. You cannot point to a single word they said that was outright cruel. Nothing happened, and yet everything happened. You feel smaller than when you walked in. You feel like your air was quietly taken from you. The way someone steals coins from a sleeping man's pocket, not enough that he wakes, but enough that he arrives at the market and finds himself poor. Shalom, dear friends. My name is Adam. I grew up in a family where words were treated like fire. My grandfather, Naum, may his memory be a blessing, used to say that a single sentence, spoken at the right moment, can build a cathedral in a person's heart, and a single sentence, spoken carelessly or with hidden venom, can burn that cathedral down to ash before morning. I grew up hearing this, and I thought I understood it. But it took me decades of real life, decades of friendships that confused me, relationships that drained me, and professional encounters that left me questioning my own sanity before I truly understood what Grandfather Naum meant. Today, we are going to talk about something that most people never discuss openly because it hides so well. We're going to talk about the signs that someone secretly disrespects you. Not the loud kind, not the obvious insult thrown across the dinner table. No, we're going to explore the quiet kind, the kind that wears a mask of politeness, the kind that disguises itself as concern, as humor, as casualness. I will show you the phrases, the behaviors, the patterns that reveal when someone has decided deep inside that you're not worthy of their genuine respect. And I will walk you through at least 5 traps, 5 patterns of hidden disrespect that most people never recognize until the damage has already been done. And I ask you, sincerely, to stay with me until the very end. Because in the finale of this video, I will share with you one short truth, one formula that my grandfather Naum whispered to me on a cold evening when I was 17 years old and heartbroken over a friend who had betrayed me. That formula changed the way I saw every relationship for the rest of my life. And without it, everything else I say today will be only half as useful. So please, stay with me. Before we begin, let me say something about why this matters so deeply. Hidden disrespect is not a small thing. It is not something you should brush off or learn to tolerate. It is a slow poison. It enters your bloodstream through conversations you thought were normal, through jokes you were told to laugh at, through silences that lasted one beat too long. And over time, over months and years, it reshapes you. It teaches you to doubt your own instincts. It trains you to shrink. It whispers to you that maybe you're the problem, maybe you are too sensitive, maybe you expect too much from people. Grandfather Naum used to say, "A man who is bitten by a snake every day will eventually forget what it felt like to live without venom in his blood." That is what hidden disrespect does. It becomes your normal. And when something becomes your normal, you stop fighting it. And that is when it has truly won. Let us begin with the first pattern, and it is one that nearly every person alive has experienced, though very few have named it. I call it the velvet dismissal. This is what happens when someone consistently minimizes your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences, your achievements, but does it so gently that you feel foolish for objecting. You know the phrases. You have heard them. You tell someone about a promotion you received at work, and they say, "Oh, that is nice. I guess they needed to fill the spot." You share a problem that has been keeping you awake at night, and they say, "Honestly, that does not sound like a big deal, but okay." You express an opinion about something you feel strongly about, and they tilt their head and say, "That is an interesting way to see it," with a tone that tells you they find it anything but interesting. You describe a dream you've been nurturing, and they say, "Sure, but have you thought about being realistic?" You share something painful that happened to you, and they say, "Well, everyone goes through stuff like that." Do you hear it? None of these sentences contain a single insult. There is no name calling, no shouting, no fist on the table. And that is precisely what makes the velvet dismissal so dangerous. Because when you try to confront it, when you say, "That hurt me," The other person looks at you with wide, innocent eyes and says, "What did I do? I was just being honest. I was just trying to help." You are overreacting, and now you are the problem. Now you're the one who is too sensitive, too dramatic, too needy. But let me tell you what is actually happening beneath the surface. When someone consistently minimizes you, they are not being honest. They are not being helpful. They are positioning themselves above you. Every time they shrink your experience, they are saying, without words, "I am the standard. Your life, your feelings, your accomplishments are measured against mine, and they fall short." It is a quiet act of dominance. And the root of it, the deep root, is almost always one of two things. Either they feel so insecure inside that they cannot tolerate anyone around them feeling good about themselves, or they have genuinely decided that you are beneath them and your inner life simply does not interest them. Either way, the damage is the same. Over time, you stop sharing. You stop dreaming out loud. You become a person who edits themselves before speaking, and that, dear friends, is a tragedy because a person who edits their own soul is a person who has already begun to disappear. Let me tell you about a woman named Leah. Leah was 43 years old, lived in a small apartment in a gray building near a park. She worked as a bookkeeper for a textile company, quiet work, steady work, the kind of work where the numbers always add up even when life does not. Leah had a friend named Martha. They had known each other since school, more than 25 years. They met every Thursday evening at a little cafe with yellow curtains and wobbly chairs, and they talked about their weeks. But here's what I noticed when Leah told me about these meetings, and Leah was my neighbor for many years, so I heard plenty. Every time Leah shared something, Martha had a way of making it smaller. Leah once told Martha that she had started painting watercolors on Sunday mornings, little landscapes, nothing grand, just something that brought her peace. Martha stirred her tea and said, "That is cute. My cousin actually sells her paintings in galleries, but it is nice that you have a hobby." Another time, Leah mentioned that her son had been accepted into a good university. Martha said, "Oh, which one? Well, it is not the top tier, but still good for him." Week after week, year after year. And Leah had never said a word about it. She just absorbed it. She told me once, standing in the hallway of our building with a bag of groceries in her hand, "Adam, I do not know why, but every time I come home from seeing Martha, I feel tired. Not in my body, in my spirit." I looked at her and I said, "Leah, when was the last time Martha asked you a question and then actually listened to the answer without turning it into something about herself?" Leah opened her mouth to respond, and then she closed it, and her eyes changed. She stood there for a long moment, and then she said, very quietly, "I cannot remember." That was the beginning of Leah's awakening. She did not end the friendship dramatically. She did not make a scene, but she began to notice. And once you notice, you cannot unnotice. She started spending her Thursday evenings differently. She started painting more. She started calling her sister instead. And slowly, over the course of a year, the heaviness in her chest, the one she had carried for so long she thought it was just part of being alive, began to lift. So if you recognize this pattern in your own life, if there is someone who consistently makes your world feel smaller after every conversation, I want you to do one simple thing. The next time they minimize you, do not argue. Do not defend yourself. Simply pause, look at them, and say, "That matters to me." 3 words. "That matters to me." And watch their reaction. A person who respects you will hear those words and adjust. A person who secretly disrespects you will dismiss them too. Now, let us move to the second pattern. And this one is perhaps even more insidious because it disguises itself as closeness. I call it the joke that is not a joke. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Someone says something cutting about you, something that targets your appearance, your intelligence, your choices, your past, your vulnerabilities, and when they see the flicker of pain cross your face, they immediately say, "I am just kidding. Relax. Can you not take a joke?" Or they say in front of other people, in a group, at a dinner table, at a party, and everyone laughs, and you laugh too, because what else can you do? And inside you feel like someone just opened a small wound in your side, and no one in the room noticed the bleeding. You would look great if you lost 20 pounds, just saying, "Oh, you were cooking again? Should I call the fire department? He thinks he's a businessman now. Watch out, everyone." She always picks the wrong men. It is her superpower. You are actually smart for someone who did not go to college. These are not jokes. These are messages wrapped in laughter. And the person delivering them knows exactly what they are doing. They know. Because humor, real humor, does not target a person's insecurities. Real humor does not leave someone feeling ashamed. Real humor lifts the room. It does not lower one person so the rest of the room can feel elevated. My father Samuel, a man of few words but precise ones, once told me something I never forgot. He said, "Adam, when someone keeps poking you with a stick and calls it playing, pay attention to where they poke. They always aim for the bruise." And he was right. The person who makes jokes about your weight knows you are sensitive about your body. The person who jokes about your income knows you are struggling. The person who jokes about your failed relationship knows that wound is still fresh. They're not being funny. They're being strategic. They're testing how much disrespect you will swallow if it is coated in sugar. And the root of this behavior, I have come to believe, is a deep need for power without accountability. They want to hurt you, but they do not want to be held responsible for the hurt. The joke is the perfect vehicle. If you confront them, they say you have no sense of humor. If you stay silent, they learn that they can go further next time. It is a rigged game, and the only way to win a rigged game is to refuse to play. I knew a man named Boris. Boris was a big man, wide shoulders, thick hands, the kind of man who looked like he could carry a wardrobe up 5 flights of stairs without breaking a sweat. But inside, Boris was soft. He had a gentle voice and a gentle heart, and he loved to cook for his family. His wife, his children, his neighbors, everyone knew that Boris made the best borscht in the neighborhood. It was his pride. Boris had a brother-in-law named Victor. Victor was a sharp man, thin, quick with words, always the cleverest person in the room, or so he believed. And every time the family gathered, every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner, Victor would find a way to make a joke at Boris's expense. "Boris, you spend more time in the kitchen than my grandmother. Maybe we should buy you an apron with flowers." "Careful, everyone. Chef Boris is in charge tonight. Hide the salt." A real man builds things, Boris. He does not julienne carrots. And the table would laugh. And Boris would laugh too, a little quieter each time. One evening, after a holiday dinner where Victor had been particularly relentless, Boris was washing dishes in the kitchen alone. His daughter, a girl of about 12, came in and sat on the counter. She looked at him and said, "Papa, why does Uncle Victor always say mean things about you and then say he is joking?" Boris stopped scrubbing. He looked at his daughter, and he realized that she could see it. A 12-year-old child could see what he had been pretending not to see for years. His daughter was learning, right in front of him, that it was acceptable for someone to be cruel to you as long as they smile while doing it. The next Sunday, Victor started in again. Something about Boris being too slow, too simple. I do not remember the exact words. And Boris, for the first time, did not laugh. He set down his fork, looked at Victor calmly, and said, "Victor, I have noticed that your jokes about me are always about the same things. What is it about me that bothers you so much?" The table went silent. Victor stammered, tried to laugh it off, said Boris was being too serious. But the silence around that table spoke louder than any joke ever had. Victor never made those jokes again. Not because he suddenly developed respect for Boris, but because Boris had made the cost of the joke higher than the pleasure of telling it. If this is happening in your life, here is what I want you to remember. You do not owe anyone your laughter when the joke is aimed at your wounds. You are not required to be a good sport about your own diminishment. The next time someone makes a joke at your expense and tells you to relax, try this. Do not laugh. Simply say, with calm and without anger, "What do you mean by that?" Make them explain the joke. Because when you force someone to explain a cruel joke, the cruelty stands naked in the room, and suddenly it is not funny anymore. The third pattern is one that took me the longest to understand in my own life. I call it the conditional availability. This is the person who is only present in your life when it suits them. When they need you, they are warm, they are close, they call, they text, they show up at your door with a smile and a problem. But when you need them, they vanish. Not dramatically, not with a door slam or a goodbye. They simply become unavailable. They are busy. They forgot. They did not see your message. They will call you back, but they never do. You know the phrases. I have been meaning to call you. Things have been crazy. Sorry I missed your birthday. You know how it is. I would love to help, but I just have so much going on right now. Let us get together soon. And soon never comes. I'm always here for you, said by a person who is never actually there for you. These phrases sound reasonable in isolation. Everyone is busy. Everyone has seasons of chaos. But when you look at the pattern, when you step back and see the full picture, you realize something devastating. This person has made a calculation about your value, and the calculation is simple. You are useful when they need something and irrelevant when they do not. Grandmother Rachel, my father's mother, a woman who could peel an apple in one unbroken spiral and who saw through people the way sunlight sees through a curtain, she once said to me, Adam, watch how a person treats you when you have nothing to offer them. That is who they really are. And she was so right it almost hurts to repeat it. Because the truth is, respect is not measured by how someone treats you when you're useful. Respect is measured by how they treat you when you're inconvenient, when you call it a bad time, when you need help with something that gives them no benefit, when you are sad and heavy and have nothing entertaining or profitable to bring to the table. That is when you discover who truly respects you and who is simply managing you. The root of conditional availability is a transactional view of relationships. The person sees every interaction as an exchange. They give attention in order to receive something, whether it is help, validation, entertainment, or the comfort of knowing someone is waiting in the wings for them. They do not see you as a person. They see you as a resource. And when the resource is not needed, it goes back on the shelf. There was a man in our neighborhood named Haim. Haim was the kind of person everyone called when something went wrong. Pipe burst? Call Haim. Need someone to drive you to the airport at 4 in the morning? Haim will do it. Need advice about a contract? Haim knows someone. He was generous with his time, generous with his skills, generous with his heart. And he had a friend, or so he believed, a man named David, who had been in his life since their 20s. David was charming, successful, always well-dressed, the kind of man who walked into a room and every head turned. And David called Haim often. He called when he needed help moving to a new apartment. He called when he needed someone to pick up his mother from the hospital because he was stuck at work. He called when he needed a loan to cover a rough month, which turned into several rough months. And Haim always answered, always showed up, always gave. But one winter, Haim's wife became very ill. It was a difficult time. Haim was exhausted, frightened, spending his nights in hospital corridors that smelled of disinfectant and worry. He called David, not to ask for anything grand, just to talk, just to hear a friendly voice. David did not answer. Haim left a message. David texted back 2 days later, sorry, been swamped. Hope everything is okay. Let's catch up soon. Haim called again a week later. This time David answered, but the conversation was short. David was distracted. He kept saying, that is tough, man. I am sorry. Listen, I have to run, but let us talk soon. Soon again. That word that means never. Haim sat in a hospital parking lot after that call, in his car, in the dark, and he felt something crack inside him. Not his heart, exactly. More like the story he had been telling himself for 20 years. The story that David was his friend. The story that all those favors, all that generosity, had built something real between them. It had not. It had built a service agreement with one provider and one consumer. Months later, after Haim's wife recovered, thank God, David called again. Cheerful, warm, full of energy. He needed help with something, naturally. And for the first time in 20 years, Haim said, David, I cannot help you this time. There was a pause on the other end. A long pause. And then David said, what do you mean? You always help. And Haim said quietly, yes, I always do. And you never do. And I'm tired, David. I'm very tired. That was the last real conversation they ever had. David did not fight for the friendship. He did not apologize. He simply moved on to the next Haim, because there's always another Haim for people like David. If you are the Haim in someone's life, I need you to hear this. Your generosity is beautiful, but is not a substitute for mutual respect. You deserve to be someone's priority, not just their emergency contact. Pay attention to the balance. Not with a ledger, not with scorekeeping, but with honest eyes. Ask yourself, when was the last time this person showed up for me without being asked? If you cannot answer that question, you have your answer. The fourth pattern is something so subtle that most people confuse it with politeness. I call it the interruption of your boundaries. This is the person who repeatedly crosses lines you have drawn and then acts as though those lines do not exist or should not exist. You say you cannot meet tonight, and they show up at your door anyway, saying, "I was in the neighborhood." You say you do not want to discuss a certain topic, and they bring it up every single time, saying, "I just think it is important." You say no to a request, and they ask again differently from a different angle with different words until your no is so exhausted that it collapses into a reluctant yes. You're not really going to say no, are you? Come on, do not be like that. I thought we were close enough that you would not mind. You are making a big deal out of nothing. If you really cared about me, you would do this. These phrases are not requests. They are negotiations with your autonomy. And each time you give in, each time you allow your boundary to be moved, you send a message, not just to them, but to yourself, that your limits are negotiable. And once your limits are negotiable, you no longer have limits. You have suggestions, and suggestions are easy to ignore. Grandfather Nam had a saying about this. He said, "A fence that everyone walks through is not a fence. It is a decoration." And he was right. Boundaries without enforcement are decorations. They look nice. They make you feel like you have standards, but they protect nothing. The root of this behavior is a fundamental lack of regard for your autonomy. The person who repeatedly crosses your boundaries does not see you as a separate person with separate needs. They see you as an extension of themselves, someone whose purpose is to accommodate their desires. It is not always malicious. Sometimes it comes from a person who was never taught that other people's needs matter. But the effect is the same whether the cause is cruelty or ignorance. Your sense of self gets eroded, one cross line at a time, until you wake up one morning and realize you have been living someone else's version of your life. Let me tell you about a woman named Clara. Clara was a school teacher, 50 years old, with reading glasses that always sat on the tip of her nose and a voice that could calm a room full of children in 3 seconds. Clara had a sister named Natasha. Natasha was 5 years older, louder, more forceful, the kind of person who entered a room like weather. Natasha had a habit. She would call Clara and announce plans without asking. "I'm coming to stay with you this weekend. I need a break from the city." Not a question, an announcement. Clara would say, "Natasha, this weekend is not good for me." And Natasha would say, "Oh, stop it. I am your sister. It'll be fine." And she would come. She would arrive with her suitcase and her opinions, rearrange Clara's kitchen because it was inefficient, comment on Clara's curtains, on her weight, on the way she disciplined her children, and leave on Sunday evening with a kiss on the cheek and a trail of exhaustion behind her. This went on for years. Clara tried to set boundaries. She really did. She would say, "Natasha, please call before coming." Natasha would say, "Since when do I need an invitation to see my own sister?" Clara would say, "Please do not reorganize my kitchen." Natasha would say, "I'm trying to help. You should be grateful." Every boundary was met with a counterargument that made Clara feel small and unreasonable for having the boundary in the first place. One autumn, Clara was invited to a weekend retreat for teachers. It was something she had wanted to attend for years, a quiet weekend of reading and reflection and professional development in a lodge by a lake. She signed up. She was excited. And then Natasha called. "I'm coming this weekend." Clara took a deep breath and said, "I will not be home. I'm going to retreat." There was silence. Then Natasha said, "Cancel it. I already told my husband I am staying at your place." And something in Clara, something that had been bending for decades, finally snapped. Not in anger, in clarity. She said, "Natasha, I love you, but I'm going to my retreat. You are welcome to come another weekend, one that we agree on together. But this weekend belongs to me." Natasha was furious. She said things. She accused Clara of being selfish, cold, ungrateful. She did not speak to Clara for 2 months. And during those 2 months, Clara told me something I will never forget. She said, "Adam, those are the most peaceful 2 months I have had in years." And that told me everything I needed to know. If someone in your life consistently ignores your boundaries and then punishes you when you enforce them, please understand this. A person who respects you will hear your boundary and honor it, not because it is convenient for them, but because they value your peace as much as their own desires. A person who secretly disrespects you will treat your boundary as an obstacle to be overcome. And when you stand firm, they will try to make you feel guilty for having a backbone. Do not let them. Your boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred. They are the walls of your inner home, and no one has the right to walk through them without your permission. Now we come to the fifth pattern, and this one is perhaps the most painful because it often comes from the people closest to us. I call it the public subtraction. This is when someone diminishes you in front of others. Not with a joke, that is pattern 2. This is different. This is when someone corrects you in front of a group, speaks over you, answers questions directed at you, tells stories that make you look foolish, or shares your private struggles with an audience you never consented to. Actually, that is not what happened. Let me tell you the real story. She always exaggerates. Do not listen to her. He does not really understand these things, but he tries. Oh, you did not know? He lost his job last month. I handle the important decisions. She handles the small stuff. These are not innocent remarks. They are public announcements of hierarchy. The person is telling the room and telling you where you stand in their estimation. And they're doing it in a setting where you are least likely to fight back. Because who wants to make a scene? Who wants to be the one who ruins dinner? My father Samuel once said, "A person who builds you up when others are watching loves you. A person who tears you down when others are watching fears you." And I believe he was right. Public subtraction often comes from a place of deep insecurity. The person cannot tolerate you shining because your light makes them feel dim. So they blow out your candle in a room full of people and hope no one notices the smoke. The damage of this pattern is enormous because it does not just affect how you feel about yourself. It affects how others perceive you. When someone repeatedly corrects you, speaks for you, or diminishes you in front of friends, family, or colleagues, they are shaping a narrative. They are training the people around you to see you as less competent, less trustworthy, less worthy of attention. And over time, that narrative becomes reality, not because it is true, but because it has been repeated so many times that even you start to believe it. There was a couple I knew, Daniel and Miriam. They had been married for 18 years. Daniel was a quiet man, a woodworker, a man who spoke more with his hands than his mouth. Miriam was social, energetic, the kind of woman who organized neighborhood events and knew everyone by name. They seemed happy from the outside, but when you sat at their dinner table with other guests, you noticed something. Whenever Daniel began to tell a story, Miriam would interrupt. Not rudely, not with malice on her face, but she would say things like, "Daniel, you're telling it wrong, let me." Or she would add to the guests, "He always gets the details mixed up, bless his heart." Or Daniel would offer an opinion about something, politics, a movie, a recipe, and Miriam would say, "Oh, Daniel, you do not really know about that," and redirect the conversation. And Daniel would go quiet. He would look down at his plate and continue eating, and the table would move on, and no one seemed to notice that a man had just been erased from his own dinner party. I noticed. I noticed because I had seen this before in other homes at other tables. One evening, after the guests had left and I was helping Daniel carry chairs back inside, I said to him, "Daniel, can I ask you something?" He said, "Of course." I said, "When was the last time you finished a story at your own dinner table?" He stopped. He was holding a chair in midair, and he just stopped. He looked at me with an expression I can only describe as the face of a man who has just been told something he already knew but was afraid to say out loud. He put the chair down and said, "I do not remember, Adam. I honestly do not remember. I did not tell Daniel what to do. That was not my place. But I said to him what Grandfather Naum would have said. I said, a man who is silenced in his own home will eventually become silent everywhere. And silence that is not chosen is not peace. It is surrender." Daniel did not respond. But 3 weeks later, I saw him in the yard, building a birdhouse, and he told me he had started going to a woodworking class on Tuesday evenings. "By myself," he said. "Just for me." He was not fixing his marriage with that class. He was fixing something deeper. He was remembering that he was a person who existed outside of Miriam's narration of him. That was enough to begin with. If someone in your life subtracts you in public, if they speak for you, over you, or about you in ways that leave you feeling invisible, please know this. You have a voice. It is yours. It does not belong to anyone else, and no one has the right to mute it. The next time it happens, try this. Simply say, calmly and without hostility, I would like to finish what I was saying. You do not need to fight. You do not need to accuse. You just need to reclaim your space in the conversation. And if the person cannot tolerate you having space, that tells you everything you need to know about the space you occupy in their heart. Now, I promised you at the very beginning that all of these patterns, all of these traps, share one root. And they do. Think about it. The velvet dismissal, the joke that is not a joke, the conditional availability, the interruption of your boundaries, the public subtraction. What do they all have in common? They all require your cooperation. Every single one of these patterns only works if you participate in it. The dismissal only works if you stay silent. The joke only wounds if you laugh along. The conditional friend only takes if you keep giving. The boundary crosser only enters if you keep opening the door. The public subtraction only succeeds if you step out of the spotlight voluntarily. And that brings me to what I promised you. The words that Grandfather Naum said to me when I was 17, sitting on his porch, heartbroken because a friend I had trusted had mocked me behind my back and then smiled to my face for months. I was angry, confused, and I said to him, Grandfather, how do I make people respect me? And he looked at me with those old, steady eyes that had seen war and loss and rebuilding. And he said this, Adam, you will never make anyone respect you. Respect is not a gift you can demand, but disrespect is a chair you can refuse to sit in. The wise person does not beg for a place at a table where they are not wanted. The wise person builds their own table, sets their own chairs, and invites only those who are grateful to sit. I sat with those words for years, and here is what I came to understand. You cannot control how others see you. You cannot force someone's heart to hold you with care, but you can control what you tolerate. You can control how long you stay in a room where your air is being stolen. You can control whether you laugh at a joke that draws blood. You can control whether you answer the phone for someone who only calls when they need something. You can control whether you open the door when someone knocks without invitation. You can control whether you let someone speak for you or whether you reclaim your own voice. That is the secret. It was never about changing them. It was always about choosing yourself, not with arrogance, not with cruelty, not with revenge, but with the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are worthy of genuine respect. And any relationship that requires you to forget that is a relationship that is costing you more than it gives. So let me bring all of this together the way my grandmother Rachel used to gather the edges of dough before folding it into a perfect loaf. Today we looked at 5 faces of hidden disrespect. We saw the velvet dismissal, where someone shrinks your world so gently you almost thank them for it. We saw the joke that draws blood and then calls you too sensitive for bleeding. We saw the friend who appears only when they need something and vanishes when you do. We saw the person who walks through your boundaries as though they were suggestions written in sand. And we saw the person who makes you invisible at your own table. The conclusion is as simple as bread on the table. How someone treats you when no one is watching, when you have nothing to offer, when you're inconvenient, when you say no, when you take up space, that is how they truly feel about you. Words are easy. Smiles are cheap. But patterns do not lie. And once you learn to read the patterns, you stop blaming yourself for the heaviness on your chest. And you start asking better questions. Not, why am I so sensitive? But, why am I giving my peace to someone who does not value it? If these words found a place in your heart today, if something I said made you pause, or remember, or see an old situation with new eyes, then I would be grateful if you would press that like button. Not for me, but because when you do, this video reaches other people who are sitting in rooms where their air is being stolen, and maybe they need to hear this too. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already, so that we can keep walking this road together, you and I, week after week, story after story. Our circle grows not with noise, but with wisdom, and I am grateful for every person who joins it. And I have a question for you. I want you to think carefully before you answer. Of these 5 patterns we discussed today, which one have you experienced most often in your own life, and what did it cost you before you recognized it? Tell me in the comments. Be honest. Be specific. Your story might be the very thing that helps someone else see what they have been too afraid to name. I read every comment, and I learned from your wisdom as much as I hope you learn from mine. And before I go, let me say this. In the next video, we're going to go deeper. We talked today about how to recognize hidden disrespect. But next time, we will talk about something even more important, something that many people are not ready to hear. We will talk about the moments when you are the one who disrespects yourself, the habits, the thoughts, the internal voices that do more damage than any outside person ever could. It will be uncomfortable. It will be honest. And it might change the way you speak to yourself for the rest of your life. So make sure you are here for that one. Shalom, dear friends. Take care of your peace. It is the most valuable thing you own, and not everyone deserves access to it. Until next time.